If you'd handed me a ruler back then, I would have told you it was just a piece of wood with faded numbers. I didn't know yet that my mother had been using one her whole life to measure love, to measure success, to measure who deserved a seat at her table and who belonged out in the cold. And I sure as hell didn't know that 3 weeks after she walked out on my wedding, the whole country would watch her get measured right back. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The day started with rain. Not the soft, forgiving kind that makes everything smell like wet earth. The mean kind, the kind that slicks the pavement and ruins the hem of your dress before you've even stepped out of the car. I remember standing in that church vestibule, staring at the water dripping off the awning, thinking this is a sign. I should have listened. My mother was holding her whole life together with pearls, posture, and a smile she usually saved for church. She'd been doing it since I was a kid, wrapping everything in a bow so tight you couldn't see the rod underneath. The caterer was late. The florist sent the wrong centerpieces. The organist had a cold and kept coughing through the prelude. And my mother, God bless her, handled every single crisis like a general commanding a losing battle. Except she wasn't commanding. She was performing. I watched her from across the room. She kept touching her collar, adjusting that pearl necklace like it was a rosary. My father stood next to her, hands in his pockets, nodding at whatever she said without actually hearing a word. He'd been doing that for 32 years. It was the only marriage he knew how to have. My husband-to-be, his name is Ethan, was in the back room with his brothers, trying to get his tie straight. I caught his eye through the crack in the door. He winked. That was all it took. That one stupid, crooked wink made me forget about the rain, the caterer, the fact that my mother had spent the entire morning making passive-aggressive comments about the guest list. You invited your father's second cousin, she'd said, her voice like a nail file. The one who works at the tire shop. He's family, Mom. Family. She'd laughed, short and sharp. That's a generous word for what he is. I should have asked her then what she thought family meant, because I had a feeling her definition didn't include me. The ceremony started at 2. I was walking down that aisle, arm locked with my father, counting the pews like a prisoner counting bars. My mother was in the front row, third seat from the left, sitting ramrod straight. She had her hands folded in her lap, her ankles crossed. Perfect posture. Perfect grief. I looked at Ethan. He looked at me. And for one beautiful, terrible second, I thought we were going to make it. Then my mother stood up. She didn't say a word. She just rose out of that pew like a ghost leaving a sickbed, grabbed my father's sleeve, and pulled him up with her. He didn't resist. He never did. She looked at me straight through me, like I was a window she couldn't see out of, and walked. Not fast. Not slow. Just walked. Right past the altar. Right past the priest. Right past the entire 140 people who'd shown up to watch me promise my life to a man they barely knew. The church went silent. The only sound was the rain hammering the roof and the organist coughing into his fist. Ethan's hand found mine. He squeezed. I squeezed back. But inside, I was already shrinking, already becoming that little girl standing at the top of the stairs while her mother measured her against a yardstick and found her wanting. We finished the ceremony anyway, because that's what you do. You stand there with your jaw tight and your eyes dry, and you say, I do, to the only person in the room who still believes in you. The priest pronounced us husband and wife. People clapped hesitant, confused little pats. The photographer kept shooting, because that's what she was paid for, and later I'd look at those photos and see a ghost in a white dress marrying a man who deserved better. The reception was a funeral. We ate cold chicken. The DJ played at last and nobody danced. My bridesmaids kept touching my arm like I was made of glass. My father's second cousin, the one from the tire shop, came up to me and said, "Your mom's got a lot of nerve," and I didn't disagree. But here's the part one haven't told you yet. Ethan was always the quiet one, the steady one. He worked as a line cook at a diner downtown while I busted my hump as a paralegal, paying through the nose for a studio apartment we could barely afford. My mother never approved of him. He didn't have a degree. He didn't have a trust fund. He had calloused hands and a laugh that sounded like gravel and a way of looking at me that made me feel like the only woman in the world. She measured him against her ruler and found him short. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence from my parents. 3 weeks of me waking up next to Ethan, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a mistake by loving someone who couldn't measure up. 3 weeks of my mother's cold shoulder radiating through every family member who still answered my calls. I stopped calling. Ethan didn't ask me to. He just let me be. He'd come home from the diner smelling like grease and onions, and he'd make me eggs even though I wasn't hungry, and he'd sit across from me and chew slowly, like he had all the time in the world. He had a secret. I didn't know it then. The morning it happened, I was at my parents' house. Don't ask me why, I still can't explain it. Something about wanting closure, wanting to look them in the eye and ask them why they'd left me at the altar. My father let me in. My mother was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, pretending I was just a regular guest. She didn't apologize. She never did. She just poured me a cup and said, "You look thin," like that was the same as saying she was sorry. We sat in the living room. The TV was on local morning news, the kind with too loud theme music and a host who smiled too wide. I didn't care. I was staring at the china cabinet, at the set of wedding china my grandmother had passed down to her and that she'd sworn she'd pass down to me. She'd never offered it. She was waiting to see if I was worthy. Then the host said something that made me look up. "Please welcome today's special guest, a local hero who's about to change the way the city eats." And there he was, Ethan, my husband, in a clean white apron, standing on a television studio, smiling that crooked smile at the camera. The host was shaking his hand. A plate of something beautiful sat on the counter in front of him. My mother stood up. Her coffee cup hit the saucer with a crack that sounded like a bone breaking. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. My father was frozen, his mouth open, his hand halfway to his own cup. "Ethan?" I whispered. But it wasn't a question. It was a prayer. My mother's lips moved. Sound crawled out of her throat, thin and reedy, like a punctured tire. "Oh," she said. "Oh, what have we done?" And I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in my life, I saw the ruler in her hand. It was pointed at herself. The TV kept playing. That host kept smiling. And my mother stood there, frozen mid-stand, her hand still hovering over that cracked saucer like she was trying to catch a falling knife. My father hadn't moved. He was staring at the screen, at this man he'd dismissed as a line cook, this man he'd never once asked about over dinner, this man who was now being called a local hero by a woman with perfect teeth and an earpiece. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch until it hurt. Because I'd spent my whole life filling silences for them, laughing at their jokes, accepting their judgments, shrinking myself down so I'd fit into whatever box they'd built for me. Not anymore. Ethan was talking on camera. He was explaining his concept, a food truck that turned into a full-scale restaurant built from scratch, funded by every penny he'd saved from that greasy diner, every late night he'd spent perfecting his recipes while I slept. The host asked him what inspired him. He said, "My wife. She believed in me when nobody else did." He didn't look at the camera when he said it. He looked off to the side, like he was talking to me through the lens. Like he knew I was watching. My mother made a sound. It wasn't a word. It was the kind of noise a dog makes when you step on its paw. She turned to me slowly, like a rusted weather vane catching wind. "You knew about this?" Her voice was thin, papery. It cracked on the new. I looked at her, at the pearls still sitting against her collarbone, at the coffee stains spreading across the saucer, at the ruler she'd been holding all these years, still clutched in her fingers, invisible but razor sharp. "Knew what, Mom?" I said. "That my husband had talent? That he had drive? That he spent every waking hour building something while your version of success was measuring people against a yardstick you didn't even earn?" She flinched. Actually flinched. I'd never seen her do that. My father cleared his throat. He did that thing he always did when the room got too tense. He reached for his coffee, took a sip, and pretended the floor was the most interesting thing in the world. "Don't," I said. "Don't you dare pretend you're not part of this." His hand froze halfway to his mouth. The coffee sloshed. "You stood up too," I said. "You walked out too." You let her lead you out of that church like a dog on a leash, and you didn't look back. Not once. You let her measure my whole life, my future, my husband, against whatever fantasy she was peddling, and you went along with it because it was easier than fighting back. He set the coffee down. His hands were shaking. The interview kept playing. Ethan was showing the host his signature dish, something with duck confit and a reduction I couldn't pronounce. The host took a bite and closed her eyes like she was having a religious experience. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted," she said. "And you did this all on your own?" "Had a little help," Ethan said. "My wife's the brains. I'm just the hands." My mother sank back into her chair. Not gracefully. She collapsed into it, the kind of collapse that happens when the foundation you've built your whole life turns out to be sand. Her pearls swung against her chest. Her hands dropped to her lap, limp and useless. "He was always..." She stopped. Swallowed. "He was always just a cook." "Line cook," I corrected. "You made sure to say line cook. Every time. You never even tasted his food, did you?" She shook her head. A tiny, pathetic shake. "You never gave him a chance. You never gave me a chance. You walked out of my wedding because you measured him against your ruler and found him wanting. But here's the thing, Mom." I leaned forward. "Your ruler is broken. It's been broken my whole life. You measured my father against it, and look at him, a man who can't even speak his own mind. You measured me against it, and I spent 29 years believing I wasn't enough. And you measured Ethan against it, and now the whole country is going to know what you missed." She looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. Not the theatrical kind she used to get her way at the country club. The kind that comes from realizing your entire identity was built on a lie. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. I stood up. I walked to the china cabinet, her pride and joy, and I opened the glass door. The wedding china sat there. My grandmother's china. The set she'd promised me and never delivered. "I'm going to take what's mine," I said. "And then I'm going to tell the truth." She started to stand. "You can't." "Can't what?" "Tell people you walked out on your daughter's wedding because her husband didn't have a degree? Tell people you cold-shouldered her for 3 weeks while she was trying to build a life? Tell people you didn't even call to see if she was okay?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. My father finally spoke. "Honey, please. Let's talk about this." "No," I said. "You had 3 weeks to talk. You had 29 years. You don't get to talk now." I took the china. All of it. I carried it out to my car, plate by plate, cup by cup, while they watched from the doorway. My mother was crying. Real tears for once. My father had his hand on her shoulder, patting her like she was a spooked horse. They looked so small, so fragile, so measured. That night, I went home to Ethan. He was exhausted but glowing, the kind of glow that comes from being seen for the first time. I told him I was proud of him. He said he was proud of me. And then I told him about the interview I was going to give. The local news ran a follow-up piece the next morning. They wanted to talk to the wife of the local hero. I sat in that same studio, in that same chair, and I told them everything. Not with anger. With the flat, devastating calm of someone who has nothing left to lose. I told them about the church. The rain. The quiet walk down the aisle. The silence that followed. I told them about the 3 weeks of nothing. I told them about my mother's pearls and her ruler and her perfect, measured life. By noon, my mother's phone was ringing off the hook. Her bridge club called to uninvite her. The country club sent a polite letter requesting her resignation. Her church group, the one she'd chaired for a decade, held an emergency meeting and voted her off the board. She'd spent her whole life collecting status-like stamps, and I'd just burned the whole album. She called me that night. I let it ring. She called again. And again. I muted her. Ethan's restaurant got funded. Not by a bank, by a private investor who'd seen the interview and said, "I want to back a man whose wife loves him that much." We opened 6 months later. The lines wrapped around the block. My mother never came. She wouldn't dare. I think about that ruler sometimes. That invisible, insufferable yardstick she used to measure the world. I think about how she held it in her hand that morning, pointed at herself, and how I didn't take it from her. I should have. The last time I saw her, she was standing in her living room, surrounded by empty shelves and broken silence. The pearls were gone. The posture was gone. All that was left was a woman who'd finally realized that she'd measured herself right out of her own daughter's life. I walked up to her. I took her hand. And I gave her the one thing she'd never given me. Nothing. Then I turned around and walked out the door. Now Ethan and I live in a house with a yard and a dog and a kitchen where the knives are sharp and the laughter is loud. I don't measure love anymore. I just taste it. And if you want to know what happened to my mother's ruler, I picked it up. Of course, I picked it up. I broke it in half. Then I threw it away.